Hey everybody, it's Matt Shu here with Josh Hash, and we are going to talk about a topic today that gets everybody confused. It gets us confused, it gets clients confused, and it's about this whole area. We want to talk about the waist, the hips, the butt, the glutes. What are all of these things? So we've done a lot of talking with clients. We say, use your hips, use your butt, whatever, and people will say, well, what is that? And you talk about your waist, and you're like, is my waist here? Is it here? And it gets really confusing because the language we use around it is all over the place. So we wanted to go over some key points here so you know where things are anatomically, just so you understand what people are talking about when they say all these different words. So we're going to start at the highest point of this whole crazy area to start making this clear. So the highest point, when we talk about the waist is actually generally defined as the narrowest part between the ribs and the pelvis. So on Josh, you can see narrowest point is basically right above his belly button. It would be where his love handles would be if he had love handles right now, but right now it doesn't really have them. So go ahead and face the camera. So you can see he's got just that little area. It starts to come out here, right up above. That's where that waistline is for him. So it's the narrowest point between the ribs and then the iliac crests on your pelvic bones. Okay, so the real confusion starts happening though when we start thinking about the waist, because then we also have the waistline with our pants, right? And that has basically nothing to do with where
nobody wears them up here.
Not anymore,
unless
you're like
your mom maybe.
What? Don't talk about mom. So the waistline on our pants is all the way down here. We talk about the waistband, right? It's down here. It's nowhere near where the supposed natural waist is. Okay. On women, it's also going to be a little bit different, and it's going to be different on different people. If you have a lot of extra belly fat, your waist just may be even hard to find, right? It may not be that narrow here. So, but in general, we're thinking about just above the belly button as being a place where we consider the waist. In terms of the hips, the term hips gets used for basically everything with the pelvis a lot of times. Like you see somebody moving their hips or swaying their hips from side to side. A lot of times people are just talking about the entire pelvic region. That's fair. When you're measuring clothes, the hips are doing like a waist to hip ratio. A lot of times that's the whole circumference around the widest portion of your pelvic area. So it could just be your whole butt all the way around here. Now, when we're talking about hips, what are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about more of the anatomical hip, right? So kind of like where your femur is coming into your pelvis.
Which is like, where the hell is that, right? So basically, if you're looking for like hip joint, then hip joint is super hard to actually you can't palpate into your hip joint with your hands. But what you can find is on the sides of your legs, you'll find that like bony part up here, just lower than your waistband. There's going to be like a super bony part there. If you moved up and then you moved way in, like if your fingers could go straight deep in there, that's where you would find the hip joint. So a lot of times people say like, oh, my hip, my hip joint hurts, and they'll say it's deep in the joint. I've had people say like, oh, it's deep in the joint, and they'll be pointing here, right? This is not where your hip joint is, right? Your hip joint's like way up in there and then deep in there. So it's important to know the anatomy here just so you have a clear understanding of what actually hurts or what may feel weak or wherever that is. If you say like, oh, my hip always hurts, and you're pointing like back here, in a sense, yeah, this is kind of the hips, but what are we looking at here really? Right? We're talking about glutes.
We're talking about glute, yeah.
We're talking about glute max. A lot of times people will say my low back hurts, and they'll point here, and you're still saying, well, that's still glute max, right? So it's important to know your landmarks and know your anatomy around this whole area. So hips, we also sometimes use sloppily when we're just saying like that whole pelvis region, or like glutes, right? Sometimes we'll say use your hips. We want you to use your butt muscles and your hamstrings sometimes. It's just easier shorthand to say like...
It's a good way to generalize things, but if you're trying to dive deeper into, knowing what's going on, actually, like where this point on your body hurts, then it's probably more efficient to know, like Matt's saying, where your actual hip joint is and what this muscle actually is. It's not all just your hips.
It's all my hips. So,
yeah.
But it's a lot easier for us to, in shorthand, just say use your hips, right? We want your hip joints to be the things that are articulating while you're moving, rather than say your vertebral joints, your intervertebral joints. We want the hip joints to be moving, which means the hip muscles, like your butt muscles, hamstrings, are doing the work to help you control the range of motion that you're trying to accomplish. So yeah, hopefully that clears up that topic. There is a lot of ambiguity around those words, so hopefully this makes things a little bit more clear. And I hope you remember that pain sucks.
Life shouldn't.
If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, and comment. And don't forget to subscribe.